Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here at the beautiful Frink Conservation Area with Mike Bossio. Whether Mike is leading a 15-year fight to protect this community's drinking water or working on stronger environmental rules to keep our air clean, he's the advocate you deserve, standing up for you. And that's what this election is all about, the kind of tomorrow we want to build together. Now, I've just had a chance to help out with some tree planting here at the conservation area with two of my kids. Not only is it great to be outdoors, but it's a good reminder that we can't take these spaces for granted. If we want all of our kids to be able to hike in our forests and smile and swim in our lakes, we have to step up and make sure that that happens. So since 2015, we have worked long and hard to build a real plan for the environment and for the economy. For putting a price on pollution to banning single-use plastics, we're making progress. But we know there's lots more work to do. My friends, we're ready to keep moving forward. There's no doubt big polluters need to reduce emissions. But there are also things that each of us can help do. And using the power of nature is one of them. Last week, we announced that a re-elected Liberal government will plant 2 billion trees over the next decade. Just like the trees we planted today, they're going to pull carbon emissions out of the atmosphere to provide clean air, not just for us and our kids, but for our grandkids and their kids. As part of this commitment, we will invest $3 billion for natural climate solutions to conserve and restore everything from wetlands to agricultural land. Our plan will mean more jobs, in this case around 3,500 new positions, and less pollution, because we know we can fight climate change and grow the economy. We have this country's first and only serious plan to fight climate change. And the Conservatives, well, Andrew Scheer promised that the very first thing they would do is tear up that plan and cost Canadians money in the process. Conservative politicians have no plan to reduce emissions, no plan for jobs, and no plan for our future. You already know that. Here in Ontario, people have seen Doug Ford try to axe tree planting programs, putting seasonal jobs at risk and leaving tree growers in a lurch. Hardworking families shouldn't pay the price for his irresponsible choice, so we stepped in with $15 million to keep the program going. But this short-sighted decision by the Conservative government is just another example of how politicians who promise to be for the people turn around and cut services that families rely on. Actions speak louder than words. Liberals won't be rewarding big polluters and the wealthiest 1% with a whopping tax cut, and the Conservatives will. And now, Andrew Scheer wants Canadians to double down on Conservative politicians. Les libéraux ne baisseront pas les impôts des grands pollueurs et du 1% les plus riches, mais c'est ce que les conservateurs vont faire. On peut toujours compter sur eux pour être fidèles à leurs habitudes. Et pour financer le tout, ils vont couper les services sur lesquels vous et votre famille dépendent. Mais la bonne nouvelle, c'est qu'on peut adopter une approche complètement différente. My friends, you have a choice to make. Do you want a government with a serious plan to make life more affordable and fight climate change? Or do you want one that will give the wealthiest 1% a tax cut and that thinks denial is a plan for the environment? That's the choice. It's that clear, and it's that important. I'm for moving forward with everyone. Merci beaucoup.
Thanks for taking our questions. Evan Dyer, CBC News. You lead perhaps the most urban government in Canadian history. And I'd like to ask you, why do you think it is that your party has trouble connecting with people outside of the cities and suburbs, that rural voters don't seem to feel represented by your party? And if you're re-elected, what, if anything, would you do change?
I'm pleased to be here with Mike Battiste, who has been a strong member of our Rural Caucus in Ottawa over the past 4 years, delivering for people right across rural Canada. We know that we move forward with a Minister for Rural Economic Development, Bernadette Jordan, to make sure that rural Canadians have a seat at the table and see exactly what investments we've been making, from infrastructure like highways and floodplains and flood mitigation measures, to investments in broadband and the kinds of future that we know people in remote, northern and rural communities need. We are going to continue to be there for them. What we've seen is consistently Conservative governments over the years cut flood mitigation and water protection. The Conservatives cut the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Agency. They have consistently not supported our farmers, and we have done exactly that. Whether it was securing free trade deals that give better access to farmers in Canada, for example, to our cattle farmers, to the Japanese market than the Americans have, whether it's been protecting supply management in the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement against a Trump government that stated from the beginning they wanted to get rid of Canada's supply management. We have consistently stood up for rural Canadians, and we will continue. And the choice facing rural Canadians is, do we keep moving forward with a responsible plan for the future, or do we accept a government whose first act is going to be to tear up the only serious plan any Canadian government has ever had to fight climate change?
So if your government has done a lot for rural Canadians, rural areas, why do you think that doesn't seem to have been recognized by rural voters? What is the image issue that dogs the Liberal Party outside of this?
Again, we have extraordinary rural MPs like Mike Battiste, like Bernadette Jordan, like people right across the country who continually step up to defend the interests of rural Canadians and build a better future for farmers, northerners, and people living in remote locations. We will consistently make sure that we are fighting for all Canadians, and Canadians know that from coast to coast to coast. The choice is clear. Do we move forward with a government who will rip up the only climate change plan that is working, that any government has ever put forward? Or do we keep moving forward with investments, not austerity and cuts?
Abigail Beeman, Global News. One of your candidates in Atlantic Canada has apologized for their offensive comments on social media. At the same time, the Conservatives kicked out a candidate for their offensive comments. How come in Jaime Battiste's case an apology is enough?
Mr. Battiste took responsibility for his actions and apologized.
Do you feel that you're limited in the action you're able to take against some of your candidates because of your own history with blackface?
We recognize that Jaime Battiste took responsibility for his actions and has apologized.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
Okay. Monsieur Battiste a pris responsabilité pour ses actions et s'est excusé profondément.
Bonjour, hi, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Il y a le gouvernement du Québec qui songe à imposer la formule du bonjour plutôt que du bonjour aïe dans les commerces. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de cette idée-là?
Nous allons toujours défendre nos deux langues officielles à travers le pays. Nous avons toujours reconnu l'importance du français et la primauté du français au Québec, mais c'est au gouvernement provincial d'expliquer comment il légiférerait une telle chose.
Est-ce donc dire que si ça devait être adopté comme telle une loi, que le gouvernement pourrait éventuellement participer à une contestation de cette mesure-là?
On est très loin de ce moment-là. On est curieux de voir comment le gouvernement provincial légiférerait sur une telle chose, mais nous allons toujours défendre les droits, y compris les droits linguistiques de tout le monde à travers le pays.
Mais juste pour être bien clair, vous êtes contre cette idée-là?
Il n'y a aucune législation sur laquelle je pourrais me prononcer maintenant. On verra ce qu'ils vont choisir de faire. Okay. We will always defend both official languages everywhere across this country. That's something that Canadians expect of a Liberal government, and that's what we will do. We recognize that the provincial government in Quebec will have questions to answer on how they would move forward on such legislation, and we are curious to see how they do that as well.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Could you describe your process over the next day of preparing for the leaders' debate? how that works behind the scenes? And also, what did you not accomplish in the French debate last week that you want to drive home tomorrow night? What do you need to do better at that you didn't do so well in?
I think the debates, all debates, are an opportunity to talk directly with Canadians about the choice they're facing. We are a government that has put the first real plan to fight climate change in Canada's history in place, and our primary opponent, Andrew Scheer, has promised that the first thing he would do is tear up that climate plan. We are going to be moving forward with continuing to invest in the middle class and people working hard to join it. And what we've seen of Andrew Scheer's platform, because he won't release his full platform, choosing to keep it secret the way Doug Ford did, what we've seen of his platform gives tax breaks to the wealthiest. His universal tax credit gives more money to someone making $400,000 a year than someone making $40,000 a year. And he's planning to give a tax break larger than the average person makes in a year for people who are using private corporations to protect their income. We have committed to Canadians time and time again that we will continue to lower taxes for the middle class and those working hard to join it. We know that by investing in Canadians, we help grow the economy. Conservatives don't understand that and continue to push cuts and austerity as the way forward. So over the coming day, I will be reflecting on the best way to connect these messages, these truths with Canadians on the things that matter so deeply with them. How we have a real plan to fight climate change, how we will continue to invest in Canadians who need it and not give tax breaks to the wealthiest, and a range of other things like the fact that we're the ones who are going to strengthen gun control while Conservatives want to weaken gun control. I will say, however, it will be excellent to be on stage with the only woman leader out there, Elizabeth May. She was missed in the TVA debates. I think it was important to have my daughter see women leaders as well as all the men who will be up there. Okay. J'ai bien hâte au débat. C'est une occasion de souligner la différente perspective, les différents choix auxquels font face les Canadiens. Nous sommes le premier gouvernement dans l'histoire du pays d'avoir un vrai plan pour lutter contre les changements climatiques. Et les conservateurs de Andrew Scheer ont annoncé que la première chose qu'ils feraient, c'est de déchirer, d'éliminer ce plan. Nous avons fait le choix d'investir dans les gens qui en ont besoin. Et Andrew Scheer a promis de baisser les impôts pour les plus riches. Nous sommes un gouvernement qui va continuer de resserrer le contrôle des armes à feu. Andrew Scheer et les conservateurs veulent assouplir le contrôle des armes à feu. C'est un choix très, très clair et c'est quelque chose que nous allons souligner dans les prochains débats.
Hello, Mr. Trudeau. I would like to get your personal thoughts on what you felt about Mr. Battiste's tweets, in particular about women and Indigenous women.
They were unacceptable, and I am pleased that Mr. Battiste apologized unreservedly.
I would like to ask you, would you lower the voting age to 16?
I've been the Liberal Party's youth critic for most of my political career. I have been, on top of being Prime Minister, been Minister for Youth in our government over the past 4 years. And I've had many, many conversations with young people about how to better get them involved in politics. But I can say that lowering the voting age is not part of our platform, is not part of our plan. So we will not do it. But I can talk about what's in our platform because we have released our full platform. Andrew Scheer is keeping his full platform, and it's costing a secret. You know who else did that? Doug Ford. He kept it secret from Canadians and then turned around and cut health care, cut education, cut services for people who need it, cut autism programs, cut Franco-Ontarian supports. This is exactly what Conservatives do, and that is why this election is such an important choice for Ontarians and for all Canadians.
Christiane Meyer from German television. You might find yourself in the position that you have to form a minority government. Is it really totally out of the question to have a coalition, as we do, for example, with those people who take votes away, like the Greens?
There is a strong history in Canada of minority governments. There is no history of coalition governments in Canada. And on October 21st, I am focused on continuing to deliver a plan that has worked for Canadians. Over the past 4 years, not only have we put forward the strongest plan to fight climate change in Canada's history, recognizing there is much more to do, and we will do it, like planting 2 billion trees, like we've talked about this year, but we've managed to see Canadians create over 1 million jobs, most of them full-time, over the past 4 years, as well as lifted 900,000 Canadians out of poverty, including 300,000 kids. Our plan to invest in Canadians and fight climate change and keep people safer by increasing gun control is working for Canadians, and I know that's the choice that Canadians are going to take on October 21st.
Just a quick follow-up. What would you do internationally? Because Greta Thunberg came, she said Canada doesn't do enough. She says that to everyone. So what would be your plan internationally to bring forward more action against climate change?
In the very first weeks of our government in 2015, we went to the Paris conference where Canada played a key role in ensuring that the Paris Agreement became a reality. We will continue to step up at home with initiatives like a price on pollution, like banning single-use plastics, like phasing out coal plants, which I know is something Germany still needs to do a lot of work on. We recognize, however, there is much more to do, both at home and internationally. That's why we've been involved in building climate-resilient infrastructure and climate investments in countries around the world that are fighting climate change. But we're going to do much more at home as well, including cutting corporate taxes in half for any company involved in developing zero-emission technologies, because we're committing to reach zero emissions, net zero, by 2050, on top of meeting and surpassing our 2030 targets. We're going to be giving money upfront in form of interest-free loans so homeowners can retrofit and renovate their homes. We're going to be protecting 25% of our oceans, 25% of our landmass by 2025, and on our way to 30 by 30. These are the kinds of commitments, on top of planting 2 billion trees, that Canadians expect from a government with a real plan to fight climate change. And the first thing the Conservatives are going to do is rip up the only real plan to fight climate change that any Canadian government has ever had.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. Teresa Wright from the Canadian Press. 4 years ago, not far from here in Belleville, you made promises about improving services for veterans, but we still see huge backlogs of veterans looking for services, and a lot of them say they don't trust you any more than they trust the Conservatives. I know that in your platform you've made promises about mental health for veterans, but what would you do at the operational level at Veterans Affairs to try to make sure that, you know, to get veterans off waiting lists or waiting on hold in the phone?
I remember well that event in Belleville 4 years ago, where we promised to stop the nickel and diming that Conservatives had consistently done to our veterans. They closed the nine veteran service centres across the country. One of the first things we did was reopen them. And then we invested in our veterans, close to $10 billion of new investments to support veterans with better options, better supports for their families as well, better mental health supports, better transition supports. These are the things that we know we needed to do, and we have done them. But we recognize there's always much more to do. That's why in our platform right now, we continue to propose more investments in our seniors, particularly around mental health. We also recognize the charges facing military families when they get called on to move from one base to another, as so many of them do throughout the course of their lives. Deployed in different places means they need extra supports for their families, for their spouses, to be able to move forward, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We have recognized that people who serve this country deserve to be supported and cared for by their government. We have done exactly that, and we recognize we will always continue to do even more.
On Friday, the federal government filed a judicial review of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal decision on Indigenous child welfare. In the actual application itself, the argument is made that the tribunal erred in its decision, particularly in monetary compensation. Can you please talk about what you think the error is there?
We know people were harmed, and we fully agree with the tribunal on the need to compensate people. And that will be our priority if we form the next government. We agree there is a need for compensation, and we will work to ensure that everyone is properly compensated. Okay. Nous reconnaissons et nous sommes d'accord avec le tribunal qu'on a besoin de compenser les gens qui ont été blessés ou maltraités par le système. C'est pour ça que ce sera une priorité pour nous d'assurer la bonne compensation pour ces gens.
Jason Bertram, Inquiry.ca in Belleville. You have at least two candidates in this region of Ontario running for re-election. Mike in Hastings, Lennox, and Addington, and of course Neil Ellis in the Bay of Quinte riding. Given how close the race has been from day one of this campaign between the Liberals and Conservatives, and given the last election, one of those candidates won by just a couple hundred votes, unseating a longtime Conservative, how confident are you that the Bay of Quinte candidate, Hastings, Lennox, and Addington, and Northumberland, Peterborough South, this is you talked about supporting rural Canadians. How confident are you that those seats will remain after October 21st?
This is not the first time over the past 4 years I've been back in this riding, and the opportunity I've had every time I've been here with Mike, I've been in the Bay of Quinte area, in Prince Edward County, I've heard directly from people who have benefited from the choices we've made as a government, from the investments in families, from the Canada Child Benefit to the increase in the guaranteed income supplement for our most vulnerable single seniors. People have benefited from the greater access to international markets for our farmers because of the trade deals that we signed. We're now the only G7 country with a free trade deal with every other G7 country, and Mike and Neil were part of the government that did that. We have demonstrated over the past 4 years how hard we are working for rural Canadians, for farmers, for people right from coast to coast to coast, and we will continue to do that. And we get to go see Canadians with these proof points of how hard Mike Battiste and Neil Ellis and others have worked right across the country to deliver for citizens and to be that strong voice for rural Canadians in Ottawa. And I'm very excited because the choice is so clear for Canadians right across the country. Do we go back to the Harper and Doug Ford approach of cuts, of tax breaks to the wealthiest, and of ripping up the only strong environment plan to fight climate change that Canada has ever had? Or do we continue to move forward by investing in people, by supporting our farmers, by fighting climate change, by building a better future for our kids and grandkids? I know that here, across rural Canada, and indeed across Canada, the choice couldn't be clearer, and I am very confident in Canadians. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Thank you all so much.